Go ahead. I don't know that the comedians have had that much power.
Out of your mind?
No, I'm being serious.
Joe Rogan. I'm not going to.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, you can't separate. Like, if the movement is like, you know, we're being censored. No, you're not. You're not.
So Marc Maron's been making the podcast rounds lately to promote his new comedy special, Panicked, a title that might also describe how the Rogansphere is feeling right now. On a few of these shows, Maron calls out Rogan and his herd of hack comedians, not just for helping drag comedy into the gutter, but for still playing the victim long after the guy they openly backed won the election.
I've been seeing like Jeselnik having an issue with people like Tony Hinchcliffe, who he's saying uses profanity or just shock value comedy. What's your thoughts on that?
Before we go any further, let's take a look at what Howie's daughter was talking about when she mentioned Jeselnik.
I'm against cancel culture. Thank you. That's my impression of a shit comic trying to get on Rogan. In 20 years of stand-up comedy, I've been asked the same questions over and over and over again. The question I get asked the most by far is, Anthony, what do you think about cancel culture? Does it make you mad? Aren't you scared? What do you think about cancel culture? So, let me be clear. I don't give a fuck about cancel culture. What I am sick of are comedians complaining about cancel culture. It's not that hard. Do your job.
Alright, now we can go back to Maron's response.
On that.
Well, at this point, it's lazy and sloppy and hackneyed. You know, to be in a fucking club where, you know, I'm walking down the hall at the comedy club, at the Comedy Store, and, you know, in one room, someone's doing their bit about trans people, and then I get down the hall and there's someone on stage going, well, I guess I got to do my bit about trans people. Like, no, you don't. You don't. It's hack now. I mean, you know, you guys got the freedom you wanted. You can now say whatever you want. They're defeated. Their rights have been denied. The policies that you guys encouraged with your stupid material are now policy. And now, like, you know, half the people under the umbrella of anti-woke, we've lost a tremendous amount of democratic-leaning ideas and movements. So whether they knew it or not, that's what they were spearheading. So now it's reality, and you want to still keep kicking them?
I don't know that the comedians have had that much power.
Are you fucking out of your mind?
No, I'm being serious.
Joe Rogan. I'm not gonna.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, you can't separate. Like, if the movement is like, you know, we're being censored. No, you're not. You're not. There's no constitutional censorship issue with your free speech. You say things, and in a democratic shit show of an environment, you know, like Twitter or whatever, there's cultural pushback. And I'm not saying that it was pretty bad in terms of, you know, people getting canceled and stuff, and I agree that was an issue, but that's a specific issue. To frame it as some sort of free speech problem was a misdirect. It wasn't. It wasn't a free speech problem. It was that people were getting cultural pushback. That is not a constitutional issue. No one was being put in jail for saying anything. That's a free speech issue.
Also, to add on Maron's point, Rogan never shuts up about free speech on his podcast, but let's be real, he doesn't really care about free speech. What he actually cares about is making sure his hack comedians and their cult leader Donald Trump can say and do whatever they want without ever facing a shred of backlash, because fragile little Joe can handle having his ego bruised. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. Not long ago, Joe Rogan had Bernie Sanders on his podcast, and they ended up talking about free speech. Naturally, Bernie had the correct common sense take. Rogan, on the other hand, wasn't just wrong, he was embarrassingly wrong. As you will see, the hypocrisy can be more blatant.
Could have ever possibly saw that coming.
And what I worry about Trump is, you're right. You know, I read, it is astounding back in the 1780s when these guys wrote the Constitution, how perceptive they were.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, they said...
Their understanding of human desires and the power and all the corruption.
Exactly.
Pretty amazing.
And they wrote that having just fought a war and won a war against the most powerful despot on earth, the King of England, right?
Right.
And I think in the back of their minds were saying, all right, we just beat the King of England, absolute power. How do you create a new country which has checks and balances so that nobody ever has that power again? And I got to say, I mean, one of the things, and there's a lot of arguments about Trump, that worries me very, very much is this movement toward authoritarianism and going after media, suing media, taking away the authority that Congress has.
When you say suing media, are you talking about the CBS lawsuit?
Among other things.
Right, but don't you think there's a real issue with what they did?
No. In this sense,
you don't think that there's a real issue in editing conversations to give someone an answer that's different than what they really answered?
Joe, I've been on 8 zillion shows, right? In my life.
Okay.
Now, should I sue you if you ask me some stupid question that I don't like, right? Or that you do something. Should I sue you?
Yeah, but that's not what he's getting.
Well, he has sued. He has sued ABC.
Mm-hmm.
He has sued Meta. He is suing the Des Moines Register because of a poll that came out during the campaign that he didn't like. All right. He is suing CBS for this Kamala Harris interview. So do I think how many? I cannot tell you the number of stories done about me that were not good stories.
Right.
That were dishonest stories. That's what a free press is about. You don't like it, you got to live with it. All right? You do something, I'm not going to sue you, Joe.
Right, but it's not that simple, right? Like, let's imagine.
It is that simple. The problem Rogan has is that 60 Minutes edited a Kamala Harris interview to make her look better. So you would assume Rogan would apply the same standard to Trump and Fox, who did the exact same thing when they interviewed Trump. The first video is the edited version, the second is the unedited version.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
Attorney General.
Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world. But I think I would.
First of all, that second video doesn't just make Trump look suspicious, it makes him look downright guilty. So here's the question. Should Kamala Harris sue Fox for editing their Trump interview to make him look innocent in the Epstein files? Or should the Democratic Party sue Joe Rogan for giving Trump a softball interview and having Trump's nuts in his mouth for 3 hours? Funny how that's when Rogan would suddenly have a problem with authority figures suing media outlets. The point is, Rogan couldn't care less about free speech. What he cares about is making sure his side never gets called out for anything they say or do, because that's when he starts screaming about the First Amendment. And it's pretty obvious what Trump is doing with these lawsuits against media outlets that criticize him, which is to create a chilling effect, setting a precedent where the press censors itself out of fear of getting sued. If that works, we'll end up with a media too scared to touch Trump or his corruption. Basically the same self-censorship you would expect in North Korea. Now let's go back to Marc Maron because Howie tried to push back by bringing up a point Ricky Gervais made on one of his shows, and the way Maron handled it was absolutely beautiful.
But my problem is you're going to start talking about anti-woke, and that's going to be your point of view. That's going to be your ideological, grounding for what you do. Okay, that's fine, but why does it have to be the same 4 fucking things? It's like they talk about the same shit, and I don't know a better definition of hack. I mean, after a certain point, it's like, what juice does the word retard really have? How much shit do you have to give trans people? What is your big problem with gay people? What's your big problem with women? It's like, what is this, the fucking 80s again? And so to me, the problem is that language evolves. Okay, we don't use the word chink anymore. Well, maybe some of them do. You don't use the word oriental anymore. You don't use the word colored anymore. Is that, in a democratic world, people learn to treat other people with respect, communities, and live with it. So this pushback, I don't know how you frame it as anything other than.
But I think it's an outward vocalization of the time. I just went and saw Ricky Gervais at the Hollywood Bowl.
What a bore.
No, brilliant.
You loved it.
I loved it.
All right, go ahead.
Fucking brilliant.
All right.
Fucking brilliant. And he talked about kind of like this on stage. I think this new show is called Mortality. And he talked about, what we are appalled at or what we think is stupid is all about the time. And this is what I'm talking about, our cultural shift. We're not shifting it. It's shifting. He goes like, listen, right now, everybody talks. The worst thing you can be is a racist. You know, you can't, and it is right now. I mean, if that's probably the number one negative.
I don't think that's true. I think that maybe since he's written that show, the screw is turned. It doesn't seem to be the most negative thing at all. But we have a president who's a racist. And he's very popular.
He's not identified as one, though.
Well, how much digging do you have to do? Get me on a computer. I can do it in 2 clicks.
No, I know, but half the country doesn't agree with you.
So it's not the biggest problem, is it?
It's if you call him that, it's incredibly.
People call him that every day.
I know, and they are hating it.
Who is?
The people that are following that side.
Well, I'm just saying that the premise is faulty.
Well, let me tell you that, but let me finish the premise. The premise is whatever you believe is a racist move. If he lived, Ricky Gervais lived 100 years ago and bought 100 slaves, he's an aristocrat. He's not a racist. He would be applauded for owning a plantation and being that. And because he doesn't live there.
Well, we're coming close to that again. So I still think the timing is off.
But the point is, right now, if somebody tried to buy 100 slaves and had, African American people working for them,
it's going to be Mexicans, or it's going to be white people.
No, the Mexicans are being thrown out right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Also, bringing it back to comedy, not only does it get very boring and repetitive when the same topics are being discussed, but it also creates a space for lazy material. Instead of propelling genuinely talented comics with original ideas, we get people who build huge careers either on offensive jokes or by positioning themselves as anti-woke. What's ironic is that these same comics who benefited from branding themselves as anti-woke then get offended when people take issue with some of the shitty material they spew on stage. Yet they never seem to have a problem with the popularity or money that backlash helped create. Their only complaint is facing the backlash itself. Now let's go back to Howie and Mark. For some reason, Howie still tries to defend Rogan and the hack comedians in his circle, basically arguing that comedians aren't as powerful as Mark makes them out to be.
I understand what you're saying, and I look, I think you can say whatever you want. I don't care. I have no, I've been filthy. I've said all the bad things on stage. I've been doing this a long time, under the radar in a lot of ways, and I have tried everything. I've done things that were inappropriate on stage. I've said things that were inappropriate on stage, and my experience with people receiving those things and talking to people, and I've evolved the way I present comedy. I think when you talk about Jeselnik, he's just saying that, isn't there a creativity workaround that could be funny without creating this juice that just comes from using words that used to be kind of triggering and are less now because the dominant cultural force is now slightly fascistic and leaning towards alienating those voices. So now that we've crossed that hump into what we are now, aren't you just kicking someone when they're down and just being a hack? Because there is no real progressive pushback anymore. They've won. Right, so that side has won. They've won culture, and they've won the presidency, and now you have a lot of frightened people that believe in what was once democracy in terms of respecting all types of people. That's kind of gone. So do you continue along that track of being the victim of some liberal conspiracy when it clearly is over? I don't know. So maybe I stand with Jeselnik.
Yeah, my understanding of what he was saying was less about politics and where we are as a culture and society right now, and more about the art of comedy. And to him, it's not comedy just to say something shocking.
That's right. It's a workaround.
Yeah.
Be more creative.
Yeah.
Don't be a hack.
But you also are giving comedy a lot more power than I think it has in our society.
I think that might have been true a few years ago, but I don't think that's true anymore. Because with what you're doing now, what you're doing here, once old-time show business, look, if you connect all this anti-elitism, anti-Hollywood talk to right-wing ideology and propaganda, what has happened now is that old-time show business is anemic. It's dead.
Yes.
And so, what's happened is, and in a good way, entrepreneurial way, which is, sort of, your bag, is that, you can start your own show business. and you can find your own audience.
Right.
And that all seemed pretty good. But if a lot of, and these are comics, if the audience that you build has decided they know what real comedy is, they know that woke people suck, they know that whatever, scientists are liars, they know that whatever the ideological foundation of that audience is, if you're a comic at the tip of that iceberg and you're championing that just by being funny and then skirting the responsibility by saying like, yeah, I'm just a comic, my fans are my fans, then I think you're being disingenuous or stupid. I do think that comedy or certain comedians have a great deal of cultural weight now.
So I think Mark nailed it. Rogan, for example, has one of the biggest podcasts globally, so the impact he has not only in the US but worldwide is quite insane. To argue that comedy and comedians aren't powerful and don't have the ability to influence, for example, a presidential election, is, to put it nicely, a naive take. That being said, I think things might be changing, and Marc Maron's tour against the Rogansphere is actually working. The reason I say this is because if this interview between Howie and Mark had taken place 5 years ago, the person who would have received the most backlash would have been Mark, for daring to criticize Rogan and his herd of hack comedians. But it seems that if you look at the comment section, the person who received the most backlash was not Mark. In fact, it was Howie for trying to defend the Rogansphere. For someone without a spine, it's pretty impressive how Howie sits upright. Howie says comedy had no power. Why did Trump and Vance make the rounds on comedy podcasts then? Not sure what world Howie is living in if he thinks popular comedians, particularly in the podcast space, didn't have an outsized impact this past election, and on culture in general. Maron is making Howie look like a real fool. So at the end of the day, Rogan and his herd of hack comedians are terrified of anyone actually calling them out. They wrap themselves in free speech like a security blanket, but what they really care about is making sure they and their cult leader can say whatever nonsense they want without facing even the tiniest consequence. Meanwhile, Marc Maron is out here doing the hard work, calling out hypocrisy, defending real comedy, and exposing the Rogansphere for the shallow, lazy, anti-woke circus it is. And the funniest part, the world is finally starting to notice. 5 years ago, criticizing Rogan invited backlash. Today, defending him invites ridicule.